If you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between what you're imaging and what you're experiencing in 3D world. So then you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like the event has already occurred. Now, your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep doing it, priming it that way, the hardware becomes a software program. And who knows, you just may start acting like a happy person. And then I think the hardest part is to teach our body emotionally what the future will feel like ahead of the actual experience.
Today we're going to take a look at Dr. Joe Dispenza in an interview where he's talking with Tom Bilyeu of Impact Theory. Dr. Joe Dispenza is very well known for his theories on rewiring the brain and making it work better. And in particular today we're going to look on the concept of breaking the habit of being yourself. As we'll see as Dr. Joe's talking, he will outline some very interesting theories about the mind, about how the brain works, about how we're tied into memory, how we're recreating our lives every day, and how we can break out of it. So I think you'll find it very interesting, so let's jump right in there.
I want to dive into the whole notion of you sort of being a habitual construct.
Habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it better than your mind. So if you think about it, people wake up in the morning, they begin to think about their problems. Those problems are circuits, memories in the brain. Each one of those memories are connected to people and things at certain times and places. And if the brain is a record of the past, the moment they start their day, they're already thinking in the past. Each one of those memories has an emotion. Emotions are the end product of past experiences. So the moment they recall those memories of their problems, they all of a sudden feel unhappy, they feel sad, they feel pain. Now, how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So the person's entire state of being when they start their day is in the past. So what does that mean? The familiar past will sooner or later be predictable future. So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and you can't think greater than how you feel, or feelings have become the means of thinking, by very definition of emotions, you're thinking in the past. And for the most part, you're going to keep creating the same life. So then people grab their cell phone, they check their WhatsApp, they check their text, they check their emails, they check Facebook, they take a picture of their feet, they post it on Facebook, they tweet something, they do Instagram, they check the news, and now they feel really connected to everything that's known in their life. And then they go through a series of routine behaviors. They get out of bed on the same side, they go to the toilet, they get a cup of coffee, they take a shower, they get dressed, they drive to work the same way, they do the same things, they see the same people, they push the same emotional buttons, and that becomes the routine, and it becomes like a program. So now they've lost their free will to a program, and there's no unseen hand doing it to them. So when it comes time to change, the redundancy of that cycle becomes a subconscious program. So now 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. So then a person can say with the 5% of their conscious mind, I want to be healthy, I want to be happy, I want to be free. But the body's on a whole different program. So then how do you begin to make those changes? Well, you have to get beyond the analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And that's where meditation comes in. You can teach people through practice how to change their brainwaves, slow them down. And when they do that properly, they do enter the operating system where they can begin to make some really important changes. So most people then wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis, and they wait for loss, some tragedy to make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. And I think right now, the cool thing is that people are waking up. 70% of the time, people live in stress, and living in stress is living in survival. Now, all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. You know, a deer gets chased by a pack of coyotes. When it outruns the coyotes, it goes back to grazing and the event is over. And the definition of stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, out of homeostasis. The stress response is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. So you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, you jam on the brakes, you give them the finger, and then you settle back down and the event is over and boom, now everything's back to normal. But what if it's not a predator that's waiting for you outside the cave, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you? And all day long, you're turning on those chemicals because they're pushing all your emotional buttons. When you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. Human beings, because of the size of the neocortex, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? The answer is absolutely yes. So then, what are the emotions that are connected to survival? Let's name them. Anger, aggression, hostility, hatred, competition, fear, anxiety, worry, pain, suffering, guilt, shame, unworthiness, envy, jealousy. Those are all created by the hormones of stress. And psychology calls them normal human states of consciousness. I call those altered states of consciousness. So then we tend to remember those traumatic events more because in survival, you better be ready if it happens again. And when the survival gene is switched on, you could have 10 really great things that happen to you in your day. And you just have one bad thing that happens and you cannot take your attention off that unhappy thing because the survival gene is switched on.
Okay, so Dr. Joe Dispenza has talked about how the brain works and how we get stuck into a kind of a loop because of our memories and how our reactions are triggered and we don't seem to know the difference between what's real and not real and fight or flight response and so on. So what's all this mean, or what can we clarify on it? The key thing is we have to realize that there are three brains. What we see here is the neocortex, which is decision making. We've got the instinct and urges, which is listed here as the reptilian brain. It's the nickname, it's actually the brainstem. And we also have then the limbic brain, okay? And inside the limbic brain, we're going to have the amygdala. And the amygdala is basically the emotional brain. So it's kind of like you can think this is a lower brain, the brainstem. The neocortex is the higher brain, and the limbic system connects the two. So basically, human beings are stuck between the high and the low, and how we respond to it. Now, key thing here is fight or flight response. And fight or flight response is, traditionally going back long ago, we either hit somebody or we ran away from somebody. And with the fight or flight response, the problem is if somebody cuts you up in traffic, you feel like jumping out of your car and punching them. But do that and you'll find it will cause problems. So traditionally, in ancient human beings, we either punched the other person or we ran away from the other person. We either fought the wild animal or ran away from the wild animal. But can you run away from a school classroom, or can you run away from an office or your house and screaming down the street? Or people think you're strange, or if you start punching people in the office or punching people who get in your way, or somebody irritates you, you just punch them. Obviously, this won't make you very, very popular. And the problem we have with the way the brain works is that we tend to have this fight or flight response. And how can we do a fight or flight response in our present day society? It's very, very difficult. And basically, there's a thing there called amygdala hijack, and we have here at healthline.com. It talks about amygdala hijack, okay? And basically, okay, so it says here, to understand amygdala hijack, you understand the frontal lobes. They're part of the cerebral cortex, the area of the brain which regulates voluntary actions like reasoning and thinking. The frontal lobes allow you to evaluate your emotions. In an event of physical threat, the amygdala may jump to a fight or flight response, but the frontal lobes process the information receiving to help you determine if the danger is real. For mild or moderate threats, the frontal lobes can often override your amygdala, so you can approach the situation rationally. So you feel like you're getting annoyed at somebody, but you hold yourself back. In the case of strong threats, the amygdala may trigger the fight or flight response. Okay. So if we look at the limbic system, this is this emotional brain, the limbic system. Okay. All right. And the amygdala. Okay. So the amygdala. Okay. So we have the amygdala, right? The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure in the brain. Its name comes from the Greek word for almonds. It looks like an almond. Okay, so we have the limbic system, and deep inside there is the amygdala. Okay. Now, it's the emotional brain. Here's the interesting two paths of fear. The amygdala lets you react almost instantaneously to the presence of danger. So rapidly that often we startle first and realize only afterward what we've done. So what's supposed to happen is you get an emotional stimulus, then you've got a thing called the thalamus, sends that to the sensory cortex, this is the frontal cortex, and it has to think about it, okay? And then it goes back to the amygdala and you get the emotional response. But if it's a very strong response, you get a short route, it ignores the higher brain, it goes straight to the amygdala. So if, for example, if you're in a fight situation, you might find that you're not thinking at a very high level. Or if you're in an accident, for the first few seconds or minute or two, you might not be thinking at a very high level. The higher cortex of the brain, so here you got your neocortex and over here the frontal lobes, they basically switch off. And this is the challenge, is how do we deal with life situations without triggering ourselves into a crazy response. And that's basically our brain chemistry, and that's the problem that we have, is we are wired to react. And this comes back to amygdala hijack. They say, what is amygdala hijack? Okay. Symptoms of amygdala hijack, okay, it's where you get very emotional. Increased blood flow to muscles, expand your airways, increase blood sugar, dilates pupils, rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, clammy skin, goosebumps, okay? And, okay, so this is whereby we get way more emotional. And from a point of view of the body is designed to have a quick reaction, where you get very angry and you run away, or you get very afraid and you run away, or very aggressive and fight back. But it's only for a short period of time. Also, the body releases stress hormones like cortisol, for example, and adrenaline when you're under stress, because your body thinks you're under stress for like a minute or two. But the problem is, because we're mentally triggering ourselves, we're under stress all the time, and that really will burn out the body all the time. So the real key then is we must somehow create a gap, a space. This is what's required to get ourselves off of this amygdala hijack.
Going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty.
Why does it feel so uncomfortable? Is it because of the neurons that fire together wire together? So there's like an easiness to that loop, just because literally, and you've talked very eloquently about this, the way that the neurons connect in the brain, how rapidly, I've seen you show footage of how rapidly those connections happen, which is pretty incredible. Is that what makes it so discomforting for people?
I think that the bigger thing is that we keep firing and wiring those circuits. They become more hardwired. So you have a thought and then the program runs. But it's the emotion that follows the thought. If you have a fearful thought, you're going to feel anxiety. The moment you feel anxiety, your brain's checking in with your body and saying, yeah, you're pretty anxious. So then you start thinking more corresponding thoughts equal to how you feel.
So there you have it. We're basically wired to live in the past, to have our sense of self based upon something which is a memory of how we used to be. And their brain tends to get stuck between the higher, with the neocortex, and the lower, which is brainstem, and the limbic system. And the limbic system, of course, it basically ends up getting an amygdala hijacking. It basically, the fight or flight response gets stuck, and we tend to be over emotional. So what we have to do in order to progress, one of the things Dr. Joe Dispenza is saying is that we have to meditate to create a pause, to create a space, but also we have to reprogram our body to not base itself upon the past. We have to go beyond the past, and instead we have to focus on the future. And I think an interesting thing that helps us there, if we take a look here on, there's a guy here called Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl and his family were tortured in a Nazi death camp. He survived, and he wrote a book. His book is quite famous, called Man's Search for Meaning, after World War II. And this is one of his great quotes. He says here, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So here's a guy where the Nazis were torturing him and trying to provoke him, and he was able to hold back and respond rather than react. Now, clearly, he was in a very stressful situation, and yet he managed to respond. And the lesson he learned from this was that the power that he has is my response. It's my power. And so if you want to have a brave future, a better future, we have to let go of the past. If we look at, say, a lot of gurus, for example, and New Age thinkers and so on, they'll all talk about the importance of living in the present. And yet we're continually living in the past and comparing everything to the past, and then triggering ourselves into states of depression and anxiety, fear and anger and trauma and so on, and feeling very upset because we keep on remembering the past and we don't focus on the future. So if you want to get out of this thing of amygdala hijacking, and you want to instead have a more successful life whereby you are a more expansive version of yourself, then you have to start envisioning your future and taking time out each day to meditate and to reflect, maybe keep a journal and do some work on yourself to find out where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and work towards becoming the person that you want to be. Spend more time thinking about who you want to become and less time about how you were, because if you're continually remembering yesterday, you can't move forward to tomorrow. Okay? So that's the big takeaway what we're looking at here. The other thing is, if we look at the idea of breaking the habit of being yourself, we should be in the moment rather than being a bunch of habits and a habitual self. Your habitual self is you frozen in a moment in time. And hopefully after watching this video, it'll make you think about how the brain works, how we create a reality based upon our past, and how we really have to break out of this self, which is really only a self